You told someone. That was the moment it started dying. Not because they laughed, not because they doubted you out loud. Sometimes they smiled, nodded, even said, "That's amazing." And still something quietly left the room. You felt it, that strange deflation, like a balloon that didn't pop but simply lost pressure, slowly, invisibly. Until one morning you woke up and the dream that once burned in your chest was just a memory of a feeling. You've been told your whole life to speak your dreams out loud, write them on mirrors, tell your friends, manifest it, speak it into existence. The world made sharing feel like courage and silence feel like shame. But what if the opposite is true? What if silence isn't weakness? It's armor. What if the dream you protect in secret is the dream that actually survives long enough to become real? This isn't about fear of judgment. This isn't about hiding who you are. This is about understanding something ancient, something the Stoics knew, something modern psychology has now confirmed with data. Premature disclosure kills drive. The brain has a flaw, a quiet, devastating flaw, and most people spend their entire lives feeding it without ever knowing it exists. Comment "protect the dream" if you've ever felt that deflation, that moment something quietly left the room. You know exactly what I'm talking about. And today that changes. Think back to a dream you had, a real one. Not a vague wish, not a casual "wouldn't it be nice?" A dream that lived in your body, not just your head. Maybe it was a business, a book, a move to a different city, a different life. You could feel the edges of it. You knew what it smelled like in the morning when you imagined waking up inside it. And then you told someone. Maybe it was a best friend. Maybe it was a parent at the dinner table. Maybe it was a group chat, or an Instagram caption, or just a passing conversation where you let it slip. And for one brief moment, you felt something that seemed like relief, like finally exhaling after holding your breath too long. But relief isn't always a sign that something is right. Sometimes it's a sign that something has been released. And once released, it doesn't always come back. Here's what no one tells you about that moment. It wasn't the other person's reaction that did the damage. It wasn't their doubt or their enthusiasm or their unsolicited advice. The damage happened inside you, before they even responded. The second the words left your mouth, your brain began quietly reclassifying that dream, moving it from the "things I must do" category into the "things I am" category. And that shift, as small as it sounds, changes everything. Because the brain doesn't distinguish between identity and achievement the way you'd hope it would. It doesn't say, "Great, you've told people, now go earn it." Instead it says, "Oh, we're already this person." Then the urgency is lower. It offers you comfort where there should be hunger. It gives you rest where there should be restlessness. You've seen this before, even if you've never named it. The person who announces their diet on Monday with absolute conviction and by Wednesday has quietly forgotten. The entrepreneur who spends more time designing a logo than building a product. The writer who tells everyone about the book but never opens the document. They aren't lazy, they aren't weak. They are victims of a psychological trap so subtle, so convincing that most people never realize they've fallen into it. The dream doesn't die because the world killed it. It dies because you fed it to the wrong thing. There's a particular kind of grief that comes with this. It's not sharp, not loud. It sits in the low hum of your days, the quiet awareness that something you once believed in has gone flat. You might blame circumstance. You might blame timing. You might blame the people who didn't support you. But somewhere underneath all of that is a question you've been too afraid to ask. Did I do this to myself? The answer in part is yes. Not because you're foolish, not because you're weak, but because no one gave you the map. No one sat you down and explained how the mind actually works when it comes to ambition and disclosure. No one told you that the stories you tell about your future can become substitutes for your future, that the telling can trick the brain into believing the doing has already begun. The ancient world understood this differently. They didn't have neuroscience, but they had observation. They watched what happened to men who boasted before battle. They noticed that the ones who declared their victories in advance rarely delivered them. Not because declaration invites bad luck, but because declaration satisfies the ego before the work is done. The dream you're mourning right now, it didn't die because it wasn't real. It died because you spent it too early. And you can't afford to do that again. In 1982, a psychologist named Peter Gollwitzer began studying something that most people in the self-help world would rather you didn't know. He wasn't trying to dismantle positive thinking. He wasn't interested in being contrarian. He was simply following the data, and the data kept pointing to the same uncomfortable conclusion. Telling people your goals makes you less likely to achieve them. His research, replicated across multiple studies over nearly 3 decades, revealed something he called social reality. The concept is elegant in its cruelty. When you share a goal with someone who acknowledges it, who nods, smiles, says, "Good for you," your brain receives a hit of social recognition. And that hit, that small dopamine reward, does something insidious. It registers the goal as partially complete, not symbolically, neurologically. Your brain begins to behave as though the acknowledgement is a form of progress, because to the brain, social identity and actual achievement live uncomfortably close together. In one of his key experiments, Gollwitzer had participants write down personal goals. Some were instructed to share those goals with others in the room. Others kept them private. Then everyone was given 45 minutes to work on tasks related to those goals. The ones who had shared their intentions quit earlier. They reported feeling closer to their goal, despite having done objectively less work. The ones who stayed quiet, they worked longer, they pushed harder, the silence fed the hunger. Derek Sivers stood on a TED stage in 2010 and explained this in 4 minutes. 4 minutes. He told the audience, calmly and plainly, that every time you announce a goal, you're effectively stealing motivation from your future self. The crowd looked slightly uncomfortable. People don't like being told that their favorite ritual, the vision board session, the announcement post, the confessional conversation, might be the very thing undermining them. But discomfort doesn't change the mechanism. And the mechanism goes deeper than motivation. There's a concept called premature cognitive commitment. When you tell people what you're going to become before you've become it, you begin to lock in a self-image that hasn't been earned. You start to perform the identity rather than build it. You speak in the language of someone who has arrived while standing at the starting line, and performance, however convincing, is not the same as progress. Think about what happens in the days after a big announcement. There is almost always a gap, a quiet, slightly uncomfortable space between the version of yourself you've described to others and the version of yourself that shows up each morning. You know the gap is there, and rather than using that tension as fuel, most people begin to manage the perception. They talk more about the dream instead of working on it. They find ways to maintain the image without doing the thing, because the brain has already begun to treat the image as the achievement. This is not a character flaw. This is a design flaw. The human brain evolved in small tribes where social recognition was survival currency. Telling the group your intentions signaled competence and commitment. The tribe's approval was meaningful, and so the brain learned to reward it. But modern ambitions are different. They are private, long-term, and fundamentally internal. They cannot be validated into existence. They must be built. Kurt Lewin, one of the founders of social psychology, described a process he called substitution, the way the brain allows one action to stand in for another when both are sufficiently linked in the mind. A symbolic action can satisfy the same internal need as a real one. And there is no more powerful symbolic action than declaration. When you tell the world who you're going to be, the declaration becomes, in your brain's accounting, a down payment. And down payments feel like progress, even when nothing has been built. Now add to this the energy cost. Every conversation you have about your dream requires you to articulate it, defend it, contextualize it, and respond to other people's versions of it. Every question. How are you going to do that? What's your timeline? Have you thought about the risks? Pulls you out of the internal creative space where dreams are nurtured and into the external social space where dreams are evaluated. You begin to build the dream in language rather than in action, and language, however beautiful, is not a substitute for the work. There is a reason the most protected secrets in the world are the ones closest to completion. Edison didn't hold press conferences about the light bulb until the light bulb worked. Da Vinci didn't show unfinished canvases, not out of insecurity, out of intelligence. They understood that the act of revealing an incomplete thing invites the world to define it before you've had the chance to. And once the world has a definition, you're no longer building the dream. You're managing the narrative around it. Your brain is not your enemy, but it has habits, old, tribal, deeply ingrained habits, and until you understand them, they will keep costing you. Here's the part that stings a little. It's not just your own brain working against you. The moment you share a dream, you hand it to the world, and the world is not a careful keeper. Not because people are malicious, though some are. Not because your loved ones don't want good things for you, though their want is filtered through their own fears, their own ceilings, their own definitions of what's possible. The world simply cannot protect what it doesn't understand, and it rarely understands a dream that hasn't yet become a result. Think about what happens in the invisible architecture of other people's responses. Someone hears your dream. Maybe it's big, genuinely big, the kind of dream that requires a version of you that doesn't exist yet. And in the fraction of a second before they speak, they run it through their own internal filter, their past failures, their beliefs about what people like you, in circumstances like yours, are realistically capable of, their own unlived dreams, sitting like quiet resentments beneath the surface. And then they respond. Sometimes they say nothing discouraging. They smile, they encourage, they might even feel genuine warmth. But somewhere in the transmission, doubt enters, not always theirs, sometimes yours, projected onto their expression, their pause, their carefully chosen words. And you absorb it, you bring it home. You lay it next to the dream at night, and the dream, which was once warm and alive and entirely yours, is now slightly contaminated with someone else's reality. This is what Epictetus understood when he said, "Never tell people your plans, show them your results." He wasn't advocating for isolation. He wasn't dismissing human connection. He was protecting the sacred space where intention becomes action. He knew that plans shared become plans discussed, and plans discussed become plans dissected, and plans dissected often become plans abandoned. not through any single act of sabotage, but through the slow accumulation of other people's gravity pulling you toward the mean. Mediocrity is a group project. It sustains itself through consensus. When everyone around you shares a particular ceiling, a collective unspoken agreement about what's reasonable, what's realistic, what people from this neighborhood or this background or this tax bracket are permitted to reach for, that consensus becomes atmospheric. You breathe it without knowing. And the moment you speak your dream into that atmosphere, it gets measured against those unspoken standards. Not always consciously, not always maliciously, but inevitably. The Stoics had a name for this kind of contamination. They called it the crowd. Marcus Aurelius wrote with unusual urgency about the danger of absorbing other people's thinking, not because other people were stupid or evil, but because the crowd's thinking is designed for the crowd. It is built for average conditions, average risks, average lives. And if you carry an above-average dream, you cannot afford to live inside average thinking. You protect the dream not by defending it in conversation, but by refusing to submit it to evaluation before it's ready. There's also something subtler happening when you share too early, something that doesn't get discussed enough. You invite premature ownership. The people you tell begin gradually to feel they have a stake in your dream. They ask for updates. They offer unsolicited revisions. They compare where you are to where you said you'd be. And now the dream, which was purely internal and directional, has become a commitment to others, a performance, a project with spectators. You are no longer building it for yourself. You are building it for their expectations. And that is an entirely different and far less sustainable kind of pressure. Dreams require a particular internal climate to survive. They need the warmth of belief, the oxygen of private effort, and the stillness of uninterrupted imagination. They are vulnerable in their early stages, not because they are weak, but because they are unfinished. An unfinished thing cannot defend itself against finished arguments. If someone hands you 10 reasons why your dream won't work, while you're still in the phase of figuring out why it will, you don't have the evidence to counter them. You only have faith. And faith, however strong, tends to buckle under the sustained weight of articulate skepticism. This is why historically the people who changed the world worked in the dark, not because they were secretive by nature, but because they were strategic by necessity. They understood that the world would get its chance to weigh in, but only after the thing existed, only after it could speak for itself. Your dream, right now, cannot speak for itself. It needs you to speak for it, silently, through the work you do when no one is watching. The world will celebrate your result. It will marvel at your discipline. It will ask how you did it, and you will smile, and you will remember this, the quiet time before anyone knew, the time when it was just you and the dream and the choice to protect it. That time is now. Silence in the ancient world was not a void, it was a practice. The Pythagoreans, followers of the mathematician and philosopher Pythagoras, were required to observe complete silence for the first 5 years of their study, not occasional quiet. Not think before you speak. 5 years of deliberate, disciplined, structured silence, not as punishment, as preparation. The belief was that a mind cluttered with its own declarations could not receive wisdom. That real understanding required the internal space that only silence creates. That before you could speak truth, you had to learn the difference between what you actually knew and what you merely wanted to sound like you knew. This distinction matters more now than it ever has. We live in a culture that rewards declaration. Social media has turned disclosure into a currency. You announce a goal and receive likes, tiny hits of social approval that feel like encouragement but function neurologically, the way Gollwitzer's research described as premature completion. You perform ambition publicly and receive the rewards of ambition before doing the work of ambition. The platform is designed to make this feel like momentum. It is the opposite of momentum. It is a very convincing substitute for it. The Stoics were not antisocial. They were not monks vowing silence in mountain caves. Seneca corresponded with hundreds of people. Marcus Aurelius governed an empire. Epictetus taught publicly for years. But they maintained a deliberate internal boundary, a line between what was cultivated privately and what was shared publicly. Seneca wrote, "Retire into yourself as much as possible." Not away from life, into yourself, into the place where your actual thinking happens, where your actual values are tested, where your actual character is built, without the distortion of other people's approval or disapproval. Marcus Aurelius kept his meditations entirely private. He never intended them to be published. They were not a manifesto, not a leadership guide, not a personal brand. They were a man speaking honestly to himself, refining his thinking, correcting his failures, building his philosophy in silence, where it could be genuine instead of performed. And those private pages became one of the most enduring texts in human history, not because he announced them, because he meant them. This is the paradox of silence. The things you protect become the things that last. There is a concept in Stoicism called the inner citadel, Marcus Aurelius's term for the fortress of the self that no external force can breach. Your reasoning, your values, your will. These are yours in a way that nothing else is, and a dream, properly held, belongs in the inner citadel, not shared on the walls, not displayed at the gates, kept and cultivated in the center where it is safe from the weather of other people's opinions. This is not arrogance. This is not, "I don't care what anyone thinks." The Stoics cared deeply about virtue, justice, and their place in the human community, but they understood the difference between what is up to us and what is not. Your dream, your process, your daily choices in pursuit of that dream, these are up to you. Other people's reactions, judgments, expectations, these are not. And wisdom in the Stoic tradition begins with learning to protect what is yours and release what is not. Silence is the first act of that protection. When you stop announcing and start building, something remarkable happens to the quality of your work. There are no external benchmarks to perform against, no one to update, no narrative to maintain, no gap between the person you've described and the person you're becoming, because no one has the description. You are free to fail privately, to adjust without explanation, to grow in whatever direction the work demands, rather than the direction the audience expects. This freedom is one of the most underestimated assets in the pursuit of anything meaningful. The writer who tells no one about the book can write a bad first chapter and throw it away without shame. The entrepreneur who keeps the idea private can pivot 3 times without anyone calling it inconsistency. The person who holds the dream quietly can let it evolve into something better than what they originally imagined, because the dream belongs to them, not to the version of it they once described to someone else. Epictetus, who was born enslaved and yet became one of the most liberated minds in history, understood that freedom is fundamentally internal. You cannot always choose your circumstances, but you can always choose what you protect and what you expose. You can choose which part of yourself belongs to the world and which part belongs to the work. Choose carefully. Silence is not the absence of ambition. It is the highest expression of it. It is the discipline to let the work speak first, and the wisdom to know that the work, not the announcement of it, is what changes your life. So what does this actually look like? Not in theory, not philosophically. In your real life on a Tuesday morning, when someone asks what you're working on and you feel the pull, that old familiar pull, to tell them everything. It starts with a single decision. This belongs to me right now, not forever, not because you'll never share it, but because it isn't ready to exist in someone else's hands yet. It's still forming. It still needs the protected quiet of your private effort before it can survive contact with the outside world. And recognizing that, feeling the pull to share and choosing not to, is not avoidance. It is discipline. It is the same discipline that Marcus Aurelius practiced every morning when he returned to his private pages instead of his public performance. There are practical things you can do. Stop sharing goals before you've taken the first real action toward them. Not because talking is always wrong, but because the first action is where the brain's reward needs to live. Not in the announcement, but in the doing. Let the work come first. Even one honest hour of effort before you tell anyone creates a fundamentally different neurological relationship with the goal. You've already started. You're not performing a future self. You're building one. Find one person, maybe just one, a mentor, a partner, someone whose belief in you is unconditional and whose counsel is honest. Share with them sparingly when you need perspective, but curate this carefully. The goal is not total isolation. The goal is to stop feeding your dream to people who cannot nourish it. There is a difference between a trusted witness and an audience. Audiences want spectacle. Witnesses want truth. Surround yourself with witnesses. Build the habit of working before speaking. Every single day before you talk about the dream, do something for it. Write one sentence, make one call, build one thing. The act of doing before declaring retrains the brain's reward system. It teaches your psychology to associate satisfaction with progress rather than with performance. And over time, the pull to announce weakens, not because you've suppressed it, but because the work itself has become the reward. And finally, trust the silence. Trust that the person you are becoming in private is more powerful than the person you're describing in public. Trust that the absence of external validation is not evidence of absence. The tree doesn't announce its roots. It announces its fruit, and only when the fruit is ready. You have a dream, maybe an old one, half forgotten, slightly dusty from the times you spent it too early. Maybe a new one, still fragile, still forming in the quiet hours before the world wakes up. Either way, it belongs to you, not to your followers, not to your family's expectations, not to the version of yourself you've already described to someone who may or may not have believed in it. Protect it. Work in the dark. Build in silence. Let the results speak with the authority that only earned things carry. And one day, not when you announce it, but when you've built it, the world will see what silence made possible. That day is worth waiting for. That day is worth working for. If you're ready to stop announcing and start becoming, drop a comment below. Protect the dream. And if this kind of thinking speaks to you, subscribe to the Stoic Mode and hit the bell. We're just getting started, and the quiet work ahead is worth showing up for. Thank you for being here. Now go do the work no one sees. Yet.